so many people who want to be a speaker or want to get on stage or want to get on a video, they're too fearful to take that step, when in fact, no one really cares too much. The audience wants you to do well. I still stutter now, but who I am on LinkedIn is an authentic voice. I share all of my stories, good and bad, the wins and the losses. And I think that's what makes us authentic. You can stand up by saying the same messages, your same marketing messages as everybody else, but there is no distinguishing you from the next guy. I do focus on founder stories as opposed to brand story. There's a difference, right? I love extracting the information. So if you've got multiple sets of customers, then you need to be clear around what is the problem that you're solving for each audience.
Good morning, everybody, once again, and welcome to yet another episode of Business Networking. I have the guest today is John Maybury. He is a third generation radio broadcaster in New Zealand who's followed his father and grandfather's steps, where he's into the world of radio, where he's worked for 10 years as a broadcaster, as a host, a voice artist, and a news leader. He's also worked as an actor, MC, and TV presenter through this time, as well as honed his skills in communication. He then moved to Australia and worked in event marketing and advertising agencies, helping big brands tell their stories, brand events. Now he combines his marketing and presentation skills to help ambitious business owners and leaders to tell their stories that start business conversations so they can sell more and make more money. Then amplify those stories when they speak, post content, and record video. As a presentation coach, he helps his clients uncover their stories so they connect with the audiences on a deeper level. He's been a member of BNI now for several years, is a MSP presentation trainer, and has attended chapter meetings in India, USA, Australia, and Hong Kong. And one of his trips to India, I happened to meet him. We had a fabulous lunch, and thereafter we became friends. So I invited him on this show, and he was very gracious enough to take the time. He joins us all the way from Auckland. Welcome, John Maybury.
Vipul Bondal, thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here with you on your show.
Thank you, and welcome once again. So your journey as a radio host into marketing and all of that sounds extremely exciting. So why don't you walk us through your own story so that we hear it straight from the horse's mouth, how it all unfolded, when did it unfold, what were the reasons you did all these various things. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got here till now?
Sure. I'll give you my founder's story, which I encourage every leader to have a story, any business owner to have a story. And mine starts when I was a youngster growing up in Auckland. I was surrounded by really interesting people with good stories to tell. And they were like magicians and radio announcers and MCs, show people that just wanted to love life and have fun. And as a 6-year-old, that sounded really cool. So it was then I decided I would follow the footsteps of my father and my grandfather into radio broadcasting and show business. But about the age of 9, I developed a stutter. You know, that complete loss of power when you open your mouth to speak. And I thought that my dreams were dashed. I remember lining up at the school canteen. You know, I would have been probably 11. And I'm surrounded by all these prepubescent boys. And I'd plan out what I have to say. And I'd get to the front of the queue and I'd go, could I have a right? You get the picture. My mother said to me, John, maybe this whole broadcasting thing isn't for you. But I was pretty determined. And it kind of shows up in my why. And for me, I wanted to achieve that goal that I had set myself as a 6-year-old. And the first step was to build up my confidence. And what I did first of all was to joined a theatre group, and I got confidence by doing plays and being characters on a stage to build my confidence being in front of people. And the second thing is I met a lady called Meredith, and she taught me how to speak. And this is, Trinity College London, that type of thing, where you would learn about things you'd never ever learn again: monophthongs, diphthongs, triphthongs, neutral vowels. And then I did a lot of work on my voice and movement. And then age 21, I didn't have a stutter, and I went to work in broadcasting, as you know, for 10 years. And for me, my why is take imperfect action. I didn't know that I was going to get to that goal, but I wasn't going to die trying, right? And I think so many of us have those goals and we get knocked back. And how do we get back up again through adversity, right, and get to the goal? Then at about the age of 30, I moved to Australia and I found myself working in marketing. I unlearned everything that I thought was important, because you can imagine as a media person, it was all about me, and it shifted to all about clients. And I, over the next 15 years, told big brand stories working for, I'm thinking global clients like Nestle, McDonald's. There were a lot of New Zealand or Australian based clients. I'm trying to speak to a media, to an Indian audience, but large brands, Unilever, that and telling those stories through brand experiences. And but really there was something missing inside of those advertising marketing days. Is you didn't really get to make a difference. And I know that we, as smaller businesses now, helping smaller businesses grow, you'll know that when you work for those large corporates, you don't actually get to move the needle, to make a difference to the business, right? You just take the money and you spend the client's money, and then you might get an award or two for creativity, and then it starts again. And for me, it was what benefit is there to humanity? So when I started my business, I wanted to combine those two careers, if you like, my performance space or presentation space, where you learn to those skills that I learned as a 21-year-old don't leave me as a 50-year-old. They don't lose you. They don't leave you. And I just apply those and my marketing skills to help smaller businesses find their voice.
So that was the story. So what went in to help you overcome that stutter that you had? Because that's a major issue with a lot of people I've seen. I guess a lot of it is also how you reach out. I mean, it's a lot of it is in the mind, as they say. So what happened as you kept on working on it? I mean, what was that crucial point at which you thought, now I can do it? And how did that happen? That seems like a very fascinating change in you, which happened.
Yeah, look, I'm working at the moment. I'm working with a life coach, and she was asking me that question just this morning. It's
All right.
And she was saying to me, "Do you think where did the stutter come from? Right? It was an internal inability to speak, to be able to say what I needed to say, and I think it stemmed from a mental block for me that I needed to be as good as or better than my father and my grandfather, who both worked in that space. And I think it manifested itself through having a stutter. And yeah, it was, for me, it was about work in progress, right? I think so many people who want to be a speaker or want to get on stage or want to get on a video, that they're too fearful to take that step, when in fact no one really cares too much. The audience wants you to do well. So it's about taking action, learning, failing fast, just like we do in business, to ensure that we have that continuing improvement in ourselves and we get better at it.
So it was all about continually improving yourself, and not one fine day waking up and it's gone. It was not that, right?
Sorry, it wasn't.
It wasn't overnight disappearing of the stutter. It
No,
was
no,
actually
it
something
took.
you worked on.
Yeah, look, it took 11 years before it wasn't as noticeable. I still stutter now. I still, you know,
While speaking.
find words that you can't say, but I don't make it mean. I don't mean that it's that I'm, I can't do a certain thing. Right. So it's, I emceed an event through LinkedIn to 150 people here in Auckland last week. Did I stammer and stutter? Yeah, I did. But who I am on LinkedIn is an authentic voice. I share all of my stories, good and bad, the wins and the losses. And I think that's what makes us authentic. We show up as an authentic individual, just like, I prefer to have an authentic background in my, when I do videos, because that's what the world needs more of, is more just people honoring who they are themselves, rather than trying to be something or hiding behind something. Sorry to talk about your virtual background.
Okay. So I know it's very interesting, because I know a lot of people who have a fear of speaking in public, because they find either they stutter or they, find a loss of words. And therefore, that's the real fear than actually, you know, not being able to talk. And a lot of people say, no, I have this, I can't speak in public. That's their refrain. A lot of people have actually not come on this particular episode because they're worried about that. They feel that they'll not be able to reply properly. But that's not really the case. I mean, you're a good example of how they can overcome that with practice, and by being self-aware that they can work on this.
Look, I think it's just about trusting in your own ability. I think the fear of being on video or sharing content or sharing anything where it's your opinion is the fear of what other people will say or think. Now, in life, we cannot do anything about that, Vipul. I may say something to a group of people and they may think something different. I cannot control them. And I think it's about owning who you are and owning your story, owning your individual expression. And if people are, giving you good feedback, then it's okay to proceed. But you're right. I think it comes down to, for me, I trust my own ability to answer a question, be in the moment. By not, you said to me, would you like the questions for the show? And I said no, because then I'm not present to the question that you're asking me, and then giving you the most honest, authentic reply. So, but for some people, I know I've been a podcast host before, and I said, would you like the questions? And I give them lots and lots of questions. These are questions we may ask you, but we may go off on we may go off on a tangent. So I think there's a certain level of preparedness, and there's a certain level of trust that you have in your own ability and owning who you are.
Great. That's a great answer. So, John, that's a nice segue into getting into I'm going to ask you next, which is, I wanted to understand your process as a presentation coach. So today you're a very successful presentation coach, but what is your process of, doing what you do? So getting authentic stories out of brands, of entrepreneurs, and getting them to talk about their own stories. What is the process that goes behind doing what you do?
John, so if somebody wanted to have their story be told, I would generally say to people, there's going to be 3 or 4 narratives within your story that will frame your why, and that will frame how you got to be doing the thing that you're doing now.
Right.
And it's my process typically starts on Zoom, just like it is right now. And I ask good questions. I interview people, and I say, as an example, take me back to a time when you were a happy kid. what did your father say to you? What was the best thing your father ever told you? And I did that for a founder probably about last year, and he burst into tears and he said to me, he says, "Oh my God, no one's ever asked me that question." I said, "Why?" And he said, "My father died when I was 13." And after a moment, and I said to him, "Do you feel comfortable talking with me about that that thing that happened in your life?" And he said, "Sure." And he told me the story, and I was moved emotionally by his expression. He told me that, and it's funny, his parents moved from India to New Zealand, and they owned a corner store in Auckland. And his father one day was cleaning the shop, and he fell down, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia. And he told me the story, and then his feelings of how he became the man of the house, and he led his mother, and he ventured into looking after himself. And but that little story, I said to him, "Have you ever used that story for your work as a real estate agent?" And he said no. And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I didn't think it was relevant." And you see, this is where those experiences, those relatable experiences, where all of those people that have had parents who have died are going to immediately relate to him. And anybody, and it doesn't matter whether it's, selling a home or buying a home, that little moment, that story told in an authentic, vulnerable way, connect with people. And for me, that's really, I just capture those little moments, those stories, 3 or 4 stories that frame who they are and how that experience can relate to what they do in business now. And it's a joyous process. There's quite a lot of trust that is required for the person to be willing to share some things that they haven't really thought that they could share in a business context. Anyway, so this young real estate agent told his story, and now he's blossomed into this marketing machine doing real estate videos with a renewed vigor, like he's the weight's off his shoulder because he's told his story in public on his Facebook page, and people have engaged and gone, "Wow, I like you even more."
Right. So that's the way. So he actually utilized his backstory to be able to sound and look and be his
Correct.
authentic human self
That's it.
in front of his customers, and then that got his customers to like him, probably love him, and therefore relate to him better.
100%.
And
And I think in a competitive world, and especially certainly here in the real estate space, here in New Zealand, Australia, there's a lot of people trying to make some money. And how do you stand out? You can stand out by saying the same messages, your same marketing messages as everybody else, but there is no distinguishing you from the next guy. Your story does that. Your story, it's plain and simple. And if you're looking for that sweet spot, that ability to frame your unique perspective, and you're a man of PR, you understand the story and being able to position that story to gain influence from an audience, then you know how valuable story is. And the founder story can obviously do just that. I do focus on founder stories as opposed to brand story. There's a difference, right? I tend to not. I try and stay away from brand story. It's a little bit more detailed, but founders, I love extracting the information and then obviously making sure that they're comfortable sharing that. Right? They need to be able to be comfortable sharing, telling when they go and meet people. I told my story when I opened the show, and you use it everywhere because it works.
great. So I have 4 questions which have come on the group, on the community. So I'll ask you all 4 of them, and you can answer them in whichever way you would like to answer them, because I just thought they are relevant to what you just said. So First one is from Aniket. He says, how do you tailor a story to fit different audiences? Okay, that's question number one. Question number two is, this comes from Sahil. His question is, what role does body language play in storytelling? Third one is from Karthik. He says, how can someone find their unique storytelling voice?
Okay, so I just frantically writing them down. So the first one is, how do you tell a story to a different to a different audience?
Different audiences. So if you have more than one audience, different types of audiences, how do you fit a story to tell different audiences? So that's the question. So
Sure. So, one of my favorite stories that I like to teach people is a client success story or a customer story. So if you've got multiple sets of customers, then you need to be clear around what is the problem that you're solving for each audience. Right. Once you can articulate the problem that you solve for that audience, then you're able to, I teach a very simple structure called ABS, and but so, in a customer success story. And it's effectively a setting, conflict resolution, right? I think as business owners or as leaders, we tend to talk in problems, and then we confuse our audience by mentioning or over mentioning the problems, right? It's just deal with one problem at a time. And I get this all the time. They go, which problem is it that you want to talk about for this audience that you know that you've solved? So work on the problem first, then work out, well, who is the audience? Therefore, frame the story for the right audience. So you might then, I would say to them, you need to describe the client or describe the audience that they're in. So if you're dealing with retailers, this was a retail shop based in Mumbai for 40 staff, right? So, and then if it's an audience of manufacturing, it's a manufacturing business with 400 staff based in Delhi, right? So you can kind of place that client by telling that story. And then you mention the problem, and then you talk about the outcome. And I think in a simple client success story, most people want to talk about what they did for them. But I kind of use the example, if here you are in the middle of summer, I was going to use the example is, if your hot water cylinder, right, in your house is broken, do you care how the maintenance person fixes it? You don't. You just want it fixed, right?
Right.
So it's a customer success story. It's not about you and what you delivered for people. It is the outcome that they got after working with you. So it's, for me, to answer the question, how do you frame a story for a different set of audiences? Change the audience type or describe a story that relates to that particular set of audience. The second one, what it was? Second one was
about body language. What role does body language play in storytelling?
Well, I think that we know that 70% of the communication that we have when we present or whether we talk is non-verbal, right? But for body language, I think there is, I would say, certainly from a voice modulation, that we need to be mindful of how we're going upwards to reflect the excitement and downward to reflect a moment of distress or conflict. But in terms of, and then obviously, so long as your body language is congruent with your voice. So, therefore, how do you employ your visual, your hands, your facial expressions to be congruent with the inflection in your voice inside of the story that you tell, right? Notice how I've gone up and then come down. I think a lot of people, and this becomes understanding your voice question as well, right? Is if you don't know what you sound like, it's very hard to change that modulation or change that pitch in your voice. I'm not a speech teacher. I just make observations and then say to people, well, explore your range, understand your pitch, your highest pitch, understand your lowest pitch. Play with words, elongate the vowels. So these are all things that I work through with clients. I like to do a tailored approach with clients because not everyone has the same issue. And like I said, it's about moving a needle. It's about giving them what's the biggest increment value that you can give them that's going to make the biggest impact.
And the third one was, how does someone find their unique storytelling voice? So I guess the answer would be more or less similar to what you just said.
Look, I think values plays a huge part in how we communicate and how we present, how we write, how we speak. So, it's probably, again, it's understand your audience and understand what do they need from you, and then frame stories that can influence them. But your own authentic storytelling voice is be you. Tell real stories. My favorite line, Vipul, is don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Right. However, in saying that, authentic stories, vulnerable stories win clients or will influence results. So really it's about just being yourself and honoring who you are.
Okay. Honoring who you are. I mean, brilliant. And how does one do this in today's digital world? I mean, today all of us are connected to devices. We, rarely, if at all, actually come face to face with somebody. I mean, all these are possibly helpful when you are face to face with somebody, even on a video call. But when you're digitally in front of people, how does that happen? So, if there are any subtle changes one needs to do when you're digital.
So in my story group, I have a group where we learn different stories for different outcomes, and these stories can be told at BNI. They're going to need to be shorter stories for your 30-second pitches, but they can be told at BNI. They can be told online, on social media, in a post. They can be told in emails, in Google reviews. Stories are to be used everywhere. It's not just face to face with people. I've been coaching a builder here in Auckland, New Zealand. He presents at one of the large exhibition home shows. And for me, it was, typically New Zealanders don't prepare when they speak, and they just, it'll be right. She'll be right, mate. And for me, for his was, how do we build relatedness from the stage to an audience that have come there for some building information? And it was him sharing his story of relatedness and how the stories are used within his business to win clients, right? So there was an element of founder story, there was an element of client success stories, but they can be used everywhere you go. And once for me, it's that customer success story or client success story structure of ABS and but so. I find I use it everywhere because I'm constantly influencing people to, come to a workshop or, so let me tell you a story about one of my customers. And, it is about practicing the structure, knowing the structure, then putting your information into the story. So it becomes your own story. And then it's about practicing that story by going out and telling it, going out and sharing it. And sometimes that's where that imperfect action comes in. It is about failing. Well, that story didn't work. It's probably not they put too much into the story, and and they didn't apply the structure. So if you look at any favorite, I'll say Bollywood movie or Hollywood movie, they all use the same. What is it? The hero's journey. Now, the story that I told you for my founders used that exact same structure. So we know that the structure is there. Apply the structure to the story, and it should work. It will work. And then practice, and learn to do it better.
Right. The practicing is the key to telling your stories, learning from mistakes as you make. I'm sure you'll make mistakes along the way, but you practice it as you
Well,
go.
I think this is the thing, Vipul, is you can, if you are self-aware of your audience, right? If you are talking to, again, it can be talking to one person or talking to multiple people. You know that when a human being is engaged with a particular thing you're talking about, they're giving you a visual cue, right? They're nodding, they're eyebrowing, they're smiling, they're like, oh, right? Look for those reactions. When some of my students present, I don't actually look at them, I look at the audience to see how the audience is receiving what's coming out of their mouth.
So that was going to be my next question, actually, unless are a mind reader in addition to being a storyteller. So how does and why do you think it's important for brands, for entrepreneurs to tell their own story? Why does this happen? I mean, I've heard a lot about this. Why do you think people love to hear other people's stories, and why do they start loving brands and people you know whom they can relate to through their stories? Why does that happen?
So I'll
And
come
I'm
back.
sure you know the why, because that's how you train people, right, into the how of doing so.
Well, it's I guess the question asking me is, well, why storytelling, right? So this is a rhetorical, this is going to come back to you. I'm going to ask you a question. What is your favorite story, children's story growing up? What is your favorite story?
My favorite children's story would be, let me think, would be the Mahabharata in India.
And what happened in the story?
Well, there was a lot of human element there. I mean, morals. There was a lot of characters who were not similar to each other. Some good guys, some bad guys. Some scheming guys. Some morally perfect people. Some absolute human beings who made mistakes along the way. So they were all people. I mean, you came across people like that in your life, and you
Sure.
met them in another place. But this story had all of them together, perhaps at one place.
Sure.
And,
So the reason I ask that thing is that we as human beings, we are hardwired for storytelling.
right.
We've been read stories by our parents, by our grandparents, for as long as we can remember, right? From we were reading books, we're reading stories, and then suddenly we stop. The stories stop being communicated to us, and we receive them from other places. We receive them from social media, people telling stories about, or brands on telling stories in print media or broadcast media. So we're used to receiving story, understanding it, and understanding it in a split second. But we as humans, we tend to not be very good at being able to communicate that story. It turns into, I don't know, a rant, or So for me, it's what I teach is that structure.
Right.
And how to keep it very, very, very simple. You can tell a big long story, but at the end of the day, let's start with the simple ones and then get to the harder ones.
Right. So this brings me to another question which came on the group a little while earlier. This is about emotions. How much does emotional stories make a difference? I mean, in your experience, have you seen a lot of emotion come out? You mentioned that about the guy in the real estate business, who had an emotional story while growing up. But I mean, how much does that work? And specifically in business, I mean,
Sure.
not a lot of the emotional in nature in that sense.
And I think that's where the opportunity lies. Is that people think, what does my story have to relate to business?
Right.
So just this morning, I have a story group on a Wednesday morning, and this morning's story was the vision story, which is typically your vision aligned with an historical person in history, a famous person who has delivered something similar.
Right.
And so it's marrying your vision with something that they have done that you're inspired to. And in my story group, there's another real estate agent, and this young man this morning was saying to me, look, I'm having difficulty getting in front of the right people. I don't know what to do. I'm doing everything, my activity to try and win some clients. And I asked him, has anything happened in your life? Has anything happened that's been quite traumatic for you? And after a moment, he said, I had a brain tumor. And I immediately went to, thank you for sharing that story. And I went in to say, can you tell me a bit more about how you overcame a brain tumor? And he told the story. And you could see the emotion welling for him, his eyes welling up, and everybody else in the Zoom room were feeling the same way. And I said, how do you relate overcoming a brain tumor to something that you solve for your clients? Whether it's determination, whether it's, belief in oneself, right?
Right.
If not, so and then he went in, and the next step in the vision story was to find who was the person that he could partner with, as in that historical person. He's maybe there's a neurosurgeon. And I sort of said to him, what about your surgeon, right? Because he has a very special relationship with his surgeon. And he jumped onto LinkedIn. He knows the person. He reached out to him. And then I was so proud for him of being able to see that he can tell a story for a vision of helping people who have had brain surgery get past it and live a healthy life.
Right.
Was much bigger than real estate, right? It's about finding that thing that
the higher purpose.
You can make like a legacy, or make a bigger impact. Yes, there's going to be flow-on effect for your real estate business, because people will see you as this caring and beautiful person who is out to change the world. So emotional stories are the best stories. Emotional stories are the ones that get the deepest connection, because you're talking to hear.
Right.
You're not talking to hear. You're talking to a heart to be able to truly influence and to connect to people with an authentic, vulnerable story. I've most of my stories on LinkedIn in written form or video form. Some of them I probably wouldn't normally share on a business podcast.
Right.
But the reason I've told those stories is that I've gotten past something and I'm proud of it. It is important to share a story from the scar, not from the wound.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. You've got to share a story from the scar and not from the wound.
Otherwise, it can come across as victim, right? What did I learn from that, and how can I help others move forward?
So I'll come to a related topic, and that's what is the main focus of this podcast, which is business networking. How much do you think storytelling and emotional storytelling, the way you just explained it and so beautifully at that, work in business networking? Because you've been in business networking for a while now.
Yeah, I've been BNI for 5 years, and I'm a networking machine. So just obviously within BNI New Zealand, we're allowed to go and visit other chapters, right? And just this week, I visited the last of the 37 chapters here in Auckland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I did that in a year.
All that in a year.
Now, as part of my presentation, admittedly, we have a longer time to pitch our business, to talk. We generally have between 45 and 60 seconds. And I'm sharing stories. I share a client success story because I can tell a client success story in 25 seconds.
Right.
Once it's just, you need to, I went to a few BNI meetings, and we're not saying anything wrong with the process, but and how they teach you on what to say. But you can tell a story within 30 seconds, but you just need to be able to practice it with a stopwatch. Right. So then the president doesn't say, right, Vipul, sit down, right? But you'll hear if it's a really good story, okay, it might not be able to work for a 156 member chapter, but for a 35 or a 45, it might be possible. But I don't know how stringent the presidents get on time. But yeah, it is about, typically, most people, when they speak, they say too much. They just say too much. So I tell stories. One of my favorite stories is the introduction story.
Okay.
And would you like to hear an introduction story?
Absolutely.
Excellent. You know, when you go and see your accountant at the end of the financial year, and you sit down with your accountant and they start talking to you about the numbers, and then after about 3 minutes, your eyes start glazing over and you start thinking about lunch. Well, what I do as a presentation coach is I coach those accountants to tell stories so their clients understand what it is they're saying and listen. In fact, I've been working with an accountant based here in Auckland with 3 staff, and she loves helping her clients succeed. But her clients often said, "Can you say that again? We didn't understand." We worked together, and now she's telling gardening stories to communicate how much tax they need to pay. And her clients are loving that, right? Now, that was about 45 to 50 seconds, and it framed an anecdotal introduction, a very relatable piece that might happen. You know, when you're traveling on a certain road and there's traffic everywhere, and it's, you know, all right, and then relating that to something that you can solve for people. So it's there's a structure there. It's set the scene, talk about what you do, demonstrate that with the client success story.
Well, very fascinating the way you put it. So tell me about your BNI experience of it. I mean, how has business networking helped you in your business?
Well, as I said, you know, most people in most BNIs, 99% of people stay within their own chapter. So for me, I have a lot of one-to-ones. That's been the basis for, you know, I'm a creative. I like the structure of BNI that we get to record our activity, and that works for me. And if I can see that I'm having 8 to 12 one-to-ones a week,
Oh, okay, that's a lot,
right? I know it seems a lot, but you know, it works for my life. I'm not married. I don't have children, so I've got time, and it doesn't take as long. To go from one side of Auckland to the other, it doesn't take an entire day, like it might in Mumbai, right? So I appreciate you can do more in a city of only 1.5 million people. So yeah. Look, for me, it's if I know that I'm doing the activity and I'm getting better at asking 2 very simple questions: how can I help? And how can you help me? Right? Those 2 questions. When I came to Mumbai and I visited 5 chapters, I asked those 2 questions.
correct.
And the how can I help was, this is where you laugh, and they said, "Can you please introduce me to your family and friends?" And I went, no, that's what my BNI is for. But then I would put on my marketing hat and I'd say, who do you want me to introduce you to get closer to those clients? You know, I think there's a lot of, certainly in BNI in New Zealand, hope this podcast doesn't get back to New Zealand, Vipul, but they don't teach you how to ask for your referring or strategic partners. You know, so you know, you're a PR man, right? Your strategic partners in a classification of BNI might be what?
In my case, it would say be digital marketing.
Excellent. Cool. So, you know, just use a BNI Global or BNI Mumbai as an example. People know people. People in BNI know other BNI people. Well, they do in Auckland, right? And it's amazing. You know, there's this thing called BNI Connect Global, where you can go in and you can search for every classification, any member anywhere in the world, and people don't use it to be able to get to those strategic partners, to be able to get to the result. So I'll tell you a short story of what I did. So I often, when I started my business, I did a lot of video training. I don't do so much of it now, but my strategic or referring partner was social media marketing agencies.
Yes.
Right. So I went into BNI Connect Global and I searched for social media marketing people in America. And I got a list of about 220 names right across. It did take a little bit of time to go through every single name by looking. This is how important your profile is, right? If you don't have much on your profile, you'll probably get discarded. Fill out a really good profile. I took out the really big ones, I took out the small ones, and I sent one cold email written in a story. What do you know? One cold email to about 120 businesses.
Right.
I had 19 one-on-ones, sometimes at the very early in the middle of the night, and I closed, thank you for closed business for 20,000 American dollars with one lady in Texas, right? Just by going, who are my strategic or referring partners, and then going off and finding them.
And this is one referring partner you're talking about.
That's one referring partner. Yep. So for storytelling,
You could have several referring partners.
correct. For storytelling, I want to talk to leadership coaches. I want to talk to leadership people because they deal with people and they understand that to elevate people, people need a story. Oh, sorry. Did I get to mention that I'm looking for leadership coaches?
You should.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, look, BNI has been it's just been amazing. I really do love BNI, and I feel, I get emotional. I feel very emotionally connected to those BNI chapters in my group. I'm in the largest chapter in New Zealand.
Okay.
When I said that at your leadership team roundtable, and I said I'm in the largest chapter with 45 members, people just went ha 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 ha. Ha. But the concept of 172 with BNI Alpha is just so foreign to anybody in New Zealand. It's like, but you wouldn't get to know everybody, right? But I came back. I just told so many stories of my experiences of going to chapters with 156. I went to Exponential and even BNI Soul was 77. And people said, well, how does it work? Right? How does the structure of BNI work? So well, you know how it works in Mumbai, but here in Auckland, the meeting starts at 7 a.m. The meeting starts at 7 a.m. and the meeting finishes at 8:30 a.m. and then they go home. Now, in our chapter, we tend to have our one-to-ones, or members will have one-to-ones between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. before the meeting, and then they'll have them afterwards as well. But when I came back and said, oh no, India is kind of like open networking from 7 to 7:45, they do the meeting from 8 to 10:30, and then they have breakfast. New Zealanders would go, oh, I don't have time for that. I've got to run my business.
Okay.
Right. And then I just finish a nice little pause and I say to them, do you want one referral a month or 10? And they go, oh. So BNI, this is just BNI in New Zealand versus BNI in India in terms of where you get your business from, right? New Zealand down here, India up here. And that's just the difference that you have because you have people and diversity and beautiful people with, I love that tandoori chicken that we had.
You're most welcome again to come over and have a tandoori chicken.
I'm definitely coming back. Definitely coming back. Look, I'm very passionate about networking. I realize that some business owners, certainly here in New Zealand, will never do the level of activity that I like to do. I like meeting people. I like saying to people, what's your story? How can I help? Sometimes I can help and sometimes I can't. Sometimes I refer to my network and sometimes there's an opportunity for business. But you won't find that by having, you won't win business if you have one-on-one a week.
So we're coming to the close of the hour. I had asked you for an hour of your time.
Of course.
So any tips that you want to give to young entrepreneurs? There are going to be a lot of young entrepreneurs watching this, people who have started their business, who have started, but are going through phases where they're learning and things like that. Any one or two tips that you would like to leave for them, both from a storytelling perspective and from a business networking perspective?
Look, I think that's what I've just said about understand who are your referring or strategic partners within within your ecosystem. You know, if you're a business coach, if you're I mean, there's so many more classifications that you'll have that New Zealand won't have. But, you know, people who understand your world, go and find them and build a referring network. And you can do that by just knocking on the door and saying, hi, I work in this area, you work in that. Are you open to collaborating? All right. Being open to collaboration or working together for the mutual benefit of passing business between each other is, you can't buy that, right? That's what BNI has enabled for me. But you can do that. You can do that without joining a BNI. Just go and talk to people and find out who those people are. And you can easily do that from a B2B business. It's a little harder for a B2C, but there's still opportunities out there. And in terms of storytelling, is probably just, in my heart is just be yourself. There's a lot of messages out there in the world that says you need to be a certain way to win, right? It's business, right? To win as a human being, you need to be. They set the standard. It's been going on for generations in terms of images in magazines, now images on Instagram or TikTok, or how you need to be. Define your values. Define who you are in a set of values that then you can show up and apply those values when you speak, when you write, when you communicate, or when you say nothing at all. Honor those values, so then you show up authentically in a digital world as well as an in real person world. And then just maybe practice telling some stories. You know, one of my favorite stories is I'm rejigging my email list, Vipul, and I'm going to write a story a week, and it'll be an anecdotal story.
Okay.
So maybe in a couple of months, your members or your listeners or your viewers can tune in, and I'll have the newsletter is going to be called The Life and Times of Peter Rabbit and His Adventurous and His Knowledgeable Friends.
Okay. So great. Thank you very much for your time, John. I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you again. And
Thank you.
Tandoori chicken is still pending for your next trip, and we'll make sure that you have it when you come. And I wish you all the best. And I look forward to receiving that email of how to make friends and influence people. It'll be great to read about them. And I wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful.